Our eyes are pleased by new architecture, growing communities, and interesting design. However, we'll eagerly jump to executing any plans without a second thought. Now more than ever, we're seeing the effects of urbanization that have affected all levels of our society. Today, I've chosen two infographics to analyze, and then I created my own, revised, and combined them two to make my own. For this project, I found two infographics depicting urbanization's impacts and solutions. And this first infographic I selected is from the Green Space Alliance, which was established to be an advocate for the significance of green spaces in Australia and to provide a voice for the Western Australian government. So I believe that the audience of this infographic is likely people who live in urbanized areas and cities with rapid growth that likely experience the effects. So I want to begin analyzing its design by starting with its color palette, as it is very crucial to the topic. Most of the images and text are within a green and earthy tones, which resembles a growth, organic, fresh, and caring, according to the science behind design, 8 psychological principles to apply to your next project. Utilizing these colors allows the audience to make a connection visually and provides a cohesive effect as you are looking at the topic and reading over the content. It all cohesively comes together. Additionally, I think the color palette was intentionally chosen to contrast with the dullness of some modernized areas. And even within our campus, some buildings lack color and brightness, which the infographic offers. The design element hierarchy depicts the difference in significance of items according to the Visual Design Basics lecture by Professor DeWitt. I believe the bottom of the infographic and the arrow seen there uses this element by showing the increasing significance of the positive effects of investing in green spaces. So, for example, the effects with the highest significance are lowering juvenile crime and usage of the power supply. And overall, I really enjoyed the infographic because I thought it was very insightful, but I do have some suggestions that I would like to change on here. So while I do believe it provided a lot of information on one page, some content could have been done away with. So for example, the member and observer organizations onto the top left side and the motto listed at the top, I believe could have been fully removed and lessened the clutter and opened up space. According to How to Fix the 15 Most Common Infographic Design Mistakes by Katie French at column 5, it recommends limiting the visual clutter in order to increase comprehension of the main message. The last thing I would change about the infographic is using more data visual representations. So data is a very powerful persuasion technique, and I think using a clear method to convey statistics, having dominance over the entire infographic, or with a graph or data table will strengthen their overall argument. Now on to the second infographic, which offers a much simpler take on presenting the issues and proposing solutions. It was made by the UN Environmental Program, which works with the United Nations in order to coordinate responses to environmental events. I believe the intended audience is people who live in populated urbanized areas because of the verbiage used suggesting that audience is at fault for the effects listed. I chose this infographic because of its usage of storytelling. While it might not seem like a long, detailed story, it guides us through the beginning of urbanization, where most were oblivious and thought it would be good for their cities, and then it goes into the effect it left on the community. According to How to Create an Infographic by Visme on YouTube, it emphasizes the importance of guiding the audience through a scene you have created, and by doing this, it finishes off the audience with a call to action and an idea on how to make change. Lastly, for its visual design, I believe it did a good job of keeping a good balance. They kept each side almost symmetrical and overall kept an equal distribution across the page. Although there were some very good aspects, there could be some things I would change to strengthen its message. Referring back to how to fix the 15 most common infographic design mistakes, It mentions a point of over-illustration and how visuals should be carefully selected to enhance comprehension. Instead of mainly visuals in the middle of the page, I would make them much simpler and spread them out across the page with text and captions to further explain what they mean. And the last thing I would change is the busyness within the illustrations. Most of the content is in the center and they're very colorful and have a lot going on. I feel like it makes it very hard to digest the content on the page. Spreading out the composition of the images would allow the reader to easily read the entire infographic and increase the attention span of the readers. For my new infographic, I envisioned combining the cause and effects presented by both of the originals while adding the perspective of understanding our role in the issue. When looking at the originals, I initially made the connection that cutting down on illustrations to mesh together the storytelling elements from the UN Environmental Program infographic, and then adding the persuasive data and illustrations from the other. I began by keeping a similar color palette of green and earthy tones to keep the cohesiveness and symbolizing the growth and sustainability being emphasized. Next, I kept illustrations and statistics that tied in together from both and went away with unnecessary data. And my new infographics visual design is very strong in unity. I believe that using elements from each of the originals allowed me to cut down on unnecessary content, provide variation in design, and appease the eye. I also tried to keep a good amount of balance across the page, number of images, and less wordiness. Throughout the structuring, I referenced back to the visual design basics lecture by Professor DeWitt to help strengthen each of these aspects, and the symbolic formula known as the function of imagination, evaluation, and knowledge, according to the creative thinking lecture, also by Professor DeWitt. I utilized a similar method of thinking when creating my own infographics by using what I already knew about sustainability and imagining how I could reconstruct it to create a new perspective for a new audience. In the critical thinking lecture, the WISE approach is described as a process of involving wonder, investigation, and evaluation. My approach to thinking emphasized investigating and speculating like the WISE approach because I was able to determine which information and which visuals were crucial in conveying my message. Overall, learning how to employ these visual design elements and all the information needed to convey my message properly was very challenging. However, I am impressed with what I have came out with in the final. I definitely think there would be improvements I would have made, like let's say my dominance and hierarchy. I definitely could have added more of those elements and spaced out certain things to create it a little less cluttered and wordy on the page. But I do think I'm using all the information that was given to me on the two infographics and using totally separate elements like the storytelling in one and all of the statistics in another was very challenging, but overall a great experience for me to have. Thank you.